Viewers, in just hours from now, U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs are all set to kick in. And this will include the additional 25% penalty that he imposed on Indian imports. Now, this would mean that just after a few hours, Americans would have to pay a 50% tariff on imports of several Indian products. Now, this is naturally expected to affect India's exports in the near future, and many experts predict that Indian exports could see a substantial drop in the ongoing financial year. So let's give you a lowdown on which sectors could be impacted by this. The sectors we're talking about are textiles as well as apparel. Exports in 2024-25 were $10.9 billion US dollars. There's also diamonds, gold and jewelry. Exports in 24-25 were $10 billion as far as this particular sector is concerned. We're talking about mechanical appliances, where exports in 24-25 was $6.7 billion, and also, of course, agriculture and meat exports, which in the financial year 24-25 are $6 billion US dollars. There's also steel, aluminum, copper exports in the same financial year, which were $4.7 billion US dollars. This is, of course, statistics of the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Now, the world is quite aware that Donald Trump can be quite unpredictable, so these are just some of the sectors that are going to be affected. However, there are some sectors that would be exempt from the Trump tax, at least for now. Which are these sectors? This is what we're talking about. This is pharmaceuticals that would in fact be escaping the Trump tax. Exports in the last financial year were $12.7 billion. There's also, of course, exempted electronics and smartphones, which are at $10.6 billion US dollars. There's also the sector of petroleum products, which was at $4.1 billion. So is India's loss going to be someone else's gain? Remember, Donald Trump has put India in the highest bracket when it comes to his tariffs, giving other nations a competitive edge simply because they only have lower tariff slabs imposed on them. Who could potentially gain? Textiles, there are likely gainers in the form of Bangladesh, Vietnam and Mexico. Which are the other sectors we're talking about? Diamonds and gold. The likely gainers here are Israel, Belgium and China. There's also meat and processed food, where likely gainers could be Pakistan, Thailand as well as Vietnam. And then, of course, there is steel, aluminum and copper, where the likely gainers are Canada, EU and UK that we are told. However, experts predict that India's exports could drop to $18.6 billion from where it stands at the moment. However, there are several who also believe that these tariffs would equally hurt the American supply chain in the short term. But how much of a drop do we expect in India as of now? 70% is what we are told would be a drop in major export sectors. Again, the exact quantity remains to be seen. 43% decline in overall shipping to the United States is what is estimated. However, there are many today also asking, why exactly has Trump chosen to up the offensive against India after a nearly 20-year-long partnership, or a steady partnership at that, between the two nations when it comes to trade and bilateral ties? And not just that, this is also coming at a time when rating agencies across the world are betting big on India. What's being stated by the biggest of them? Let's take a quick look. There's Fitch, which has affirmed India's credit rating at BBB-. There's also talk of robust growth, solid external finances, and this is also attributed to macro stability as well as enhanced fiscal credibility. Trump's tariffs are a moderate downside risk is what they state. There's Standard & Poor Global, who's talking about the upgraded Indian, or they've gone ahead and upgraded the sovereign rating to BBB from a BBB-. They've maintained the economic outlook will be stable, and they've also gone on to add that the effect of US tariffs will be manageable. 50% tariff won't pose a material drag on growth is what they say. So is the tariff imposed on India only going to affect India alone? Or will American businesses also have to bear the brunt of Trump's tariffs? After all, PM Modi has made it clear that his government will not compromise to bullying from the United States, and that they will bite the bullet to protect Indian interests. And soon after the center cleared this particular deal, in fact, this is a breaking update that we have. This is what the Prime Minister has said in terms of going ahead and keep increasing our strength. Let's listen in to what the Prime Minister specifically said, and then there's some breaking news coming up.
मेरी सरकार किसानों का, पशुपालकों का कभी भी अहित नहीं होने देंगे। दबाव कितना ही क्यों न आए, हम झेलने की अपनी ताकत बढ़ाते जाएंगे।
वोकल फॉर लोकल बने, स्वदेशी, ये हमारा जीवन मंत्र बनना चाहिए दोस्तों। गर्व से स्वदेशी की तरफ चल पड़ो।
Soon after, the centre announced a 62,000 crore deal to buy 97 more LCA Mark 1A fighter aircraft. India is now close to signing a deal of around $1 billion with American firm GE for supplying 113 more GE 404 engines for indigenous combat aircraft. Indian state-owned HAL, in fact, has already inked a deal for 99 GE 404 engines with the American firm, with the initial 83 LCA Mark 1 fighter jets ordered by Indian Air Force, and these 113 would be in addition to that. Let's go across to Rishabh for more on this. Rishabh, quickly take us through the importance of this in the midst of all the wrangling on tariffs that's taking place, the diplomatic wrangling as well between India and the United States. Comes this news. What are its implications?
Well, Madhav, if we talk about the GE 404 engines, remember we have already placed order for 83 engines. The line for that delivery had to begin back in 2024, but it did not begin. Only this year there are 2 engines that have been delivered to India. Now HAL says that by the end of this financial year, we'll have 12 GE 404 engines that will help get us our LCA MK1 aircrafts in the flying position. Remember, IAF has given first order of 83 LCAs Mark 1s, and now 97 additional have been put. So 113 more engines are being bought. The deal is likely to be signed by September, is what we are given to understand. HAL is talking to GE in US, and the deal looks like a sealed deal. For certain formalities are going.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Rishabh, thanks so much for joining us with the quick details of that. Let's quickly open this up for debate now. We have Sushant Sareen joining us, Senior Fellow of ORF, Dr. Ajay Sai, Director General and CEO of the Federation of Indian Export Organizations. Christopher Clary is a non-resident Fellow of the Stimson Center and Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Albany. We have Angie Wong, who's a Miami GOP committee woman. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with you first. Christopher Clary, it's quite clear that President Trump intends to push ahead with these tariffs. He's, of course, gone ahead and notified it as well. The big question is, who's it going to hurt more? Because the American consumer will also have to pay more. It's not going to be easy for U.S. corporations to quickly, change their supply chains around in such a short period of time. Christopher.
I think no one is really going to benefit out of these tariffs taking effect. I think the case that it's the U.S. economy is less dependent on Indian imports than India is benefited from exports to the U.S., but that doesn't mean that this is going to be a positive outcome, in part because the costs are not purely economic, but there'll also be these strategic consequences and these hurt feelings that will linger in the relationship for many years, certainly after the tariffs are gone and perhaps after President Trump is past the scene as well. But I think from a purely economic calculation, the U.S. is in a better position to weather this coercion than though the Indian economy will do okay. It will the growth will be slower than the Prime Minister's aspirations.
Sushant Sir, I want you to come in. This announcement, we all know, of course, the engines that HAL uses as far as the LCA are concerned, they come from GE. But, in the midst of all of this wrangling, and in the past, we've seen how there's been issues relating to supply of these engines. This announcement coming out of the blue, what do you make of such an announcement? Is this an attempt to sweeten the deal? Is this some kind of fresh announcement from India's side to show that they are willing to be flexible and work with the United States? How do we interpret this?
Look, I don't think this thing has come out of the blue. Obviously, there must be some negotiations going on about these engines. So it's not as though it's happened all of a sudden. The signaling probably from the Indian side is that we haven't as yet given up on the relationship with the United States. And after the Trump tantrum is over and they realize that it doesn't make any sense what they're trying to do. The excuses being given to penalize India don't stand up to scrutiny. If the Europeans can buy Russian oil and gas, if the Turks can buy it, if the Chinese can buy it, how come that does not fuel the war? And only when Indians buy it, it fuels the war. So it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. It doesn't stand up to logic, especially when somebody in the US system says that when China buys Russian oil, it stabilizes the world market. But when India buys Russian oil, it fuels the conflict in Ukraine. I don't know how you make sense of this, but maybe in the MAGA elite, they can make some sense of it. I can't. It flies against the face of all logic. But the thing is that I think India is still not ready to give up on its partnership with the United States. But I would imagine this is one of those things that we are saying, okay, let us see how this progresses. Let us not, start burning the house down. If the Americans are doing it on their side, let us try and save something for posterity and for the future, really. So let's see how this works out. But clearly, I think there is going to be a lot of voices in India which are now going to, ask a lot of questions on whether that trust factor which there was with the United States is something that we can still go ahead with.
Right.
Again, problems are going to be partly economic. And yes, Clary is right that, some of the stuff that we are exporting to the United States on which they've imposed these penalties is stuff that they can source from elsewhere.
Right.
The stuff which they can source from elsewhere, they have said, okay, on that, it doesn't matter even if you're buying Russian oil. On that, we are not going to penalize you because we need that stuff. On the stuff which we can buy from elsewhere, we'll penalize you. Now, if that's not coercion of the worst kind, then I don't know what is. And that is certainly not leaving a good taste in the mouth. And then, of course, the kind of language that is being used. We are not a Pakistan or one of those countries that you can say whatever the hell you want to say and we'll take it lying down. We are a very proud people. We have a history of being colonized by these people. And I think it's jarring for any self-respecting Indian.
Angie Wong. I want Angie Wong to come in on this because there are 3 points that Sushant has made that I want you to respond on. One, that you choose the sectors where you won't have a problem procuring and therefore it's just opportunistic on part of the US to impose tariffs on certain sectors. B, the supposed premise of all of this is purchase of Russian oil, which China and EU purchase a whole lot more of, whether it is oil or natural gas. And even the US is open to doing business with Russia when it comes to nuclear material, but India is in the wrong. And therefore, somehow these tariffs will end up, stopping the war. It's bizarre at best, the kind of logic that's being used by the United States.
Well, that is exactly what the Trump presidency is about, a lot of uncertainties. But you have to understand, part of the chaos is the Trump strategy. What started off as a very promising trade partnership with the U.S. and India is now at a total impasse. This is part of Trump's pressure campaign on India. And you have to understand, this is what he classically does. He is the art of the deal president. Now, a lot of this is wrapped up. The big elephant in the room clearly is, India buying Russian oil, right? And on top of that, China as well. It wasn't a great response from Modi to propose a visit to China as a response to the 50% tariffs. That's not working very well with the White House. But what I do see that is a good and clear sign that we can all work together is that over the weekend, President Trump has appointed Sebastian Gore to be the U.S. Ambassador for India. And I do see that there's going to be some back-channeling deals.
Angie Wong, what do you expect India to do? Just sit in a corner and not respond? In fact, US is pushing us towards China and Russia. That's how it's popularly perceived
I think there's
in India.
A lot of things happening, including I know that in Washington, D.C., the Indian the embassy has just hired a big lobbying firm. And that's probably where this GE deal comes from. There's going to be a lot of this. Look, right now, there's a pressure campaign to get Russia to the table for peace talks with
Ma'am, the
Ukraine.
GE deal's been in the works for
President
some
Trump-
time, as Sushant told us. And I just want to bring you in on one point. You know, the entire idea or the strategy of bringing Mr. Gore has actually not been a very great one here in India. It's been received quite poorly because India and Pakistan have been dehyphenated for some time. The Trump administration wants to bring India and Pakistan on the same plane, and that is not going to go down well for the United States.
Yeah, I don't believe that's the case here. I think Sebastian Gore is pretty.
Why do you have the same envoy for South Asia?
On that, because why not? Because that vacancy,
that wasn't the
that
case
seat
earlier.
has been
Just to
vacant for
set
a very
things right,
long
yeah.
time. Again, I think Sebastian Gore, he is a peacemaker. He is very trusted by the Trump team. To send one of his most trusted men to India, I think it's a very good sign to start those relationships, to start those talks. Sebastian Gore is fantastic. He was in charge of personnel for the new Trump administration. He's a very trusted member and probably one of the most high-level Trump administrators. And he's sending him
well,
to
we
India,
all know what
and
Elon Musk referred to him as, the adjective. And in fact, before I go across to Dr. Ajay Sai, I want Sushant to respond to that. Sushant, do you buy this, the kind of policy making when it comes to foreign policy? There seems to be a lot of misinformation, fantasy, call it what you may, that appears to be coming out of Washington in terms of what they perceive is their impact that their policy is having on India.
Yeah, so I think there is that disconnect which is there, and part of the reason for that disconnect is that some of the people who would earlier, moderate the kind of policies that maybe the administration wanted to pursue, I don't think there are any people left like that. The think tanks have become irrelevant. The universities are struggling for survival. They have been pushed against the wall, and this was one of the United States' great achievements in the world, the university system. Again, I'm not saying everything was all right with the universities, but I think the way they've gone after the universities, so they are not calling the shots. The media, nobody bothers about anymore. So there is nobody to really communicate to the people in the administration of what the sentiments are and how this relationship is being burned to the ground. Now, I think the appointment, we'll have to wait and see how it ultimately plays out. Yes, all the stuff which is being said about this gentleman, Sergio Gore, is all very well that he's very close to the president. And like I always say, India is not the most price posting for somebody who's that close to the president. And yet, if he is being posted out here, there must be some reason. Now, is that reason to burn this relationship completely to the ground? I don't know. Maybe it's possible with the American administration. Or is it to try and bring this relationship back on ground and maybe do some negotiations out here so that things can come back on the rails? We'll have to wait and see how that works. And just one more point. On this whole Russia question, that if you are saying that the big strategic challenge which is going to be facing the Americans is going to be China, then to push India and that the United States wants to get Russia on its side in this looming strategic contestation which is going to take place, then to penalize India because we have a relationship with the Russians, I don't see how that makes sense, because all that it is doing is, it is, pushing us more towards trying to enter into at least detente, if nothing more than that, with the Chinese.
Yeah.
I don't see how it serves the cause. So strategically, what they're trying to do doesn't really add up.
Absolutely. The means are, at complete odds with the ends they're trying to achieve. And let me bring in Mr. Ajay on that note. Ajay, would you like to, Dr. Ajay Sai would like to tell our panelists, India is not just going to be looking at the United States. Very actively, there are a number of associations that are looking at taking their business to other countries. There are already plans in place. Sure, there may be some businesses that could get hit. There could be certain sectors that get hit. It could impact on jobs, so on and so forth. But by and large, a lot of Indian businesses are now looking at business beyond the United States because there's every possibility that these tariffs could continue.
You are absolutely right. Let me just respond whether this will only impact India or it will affect the U.S. consumer. If you look into the recent report of the Goldman Sachs, 80% of the tariff burden was with the U.S. consumers and U.S. importers. Only 20% was with the foreign supplier. So that means it is going to hit U.S. badly. Of course, in the short term, it will hit India also. Roughly 55% of India's exports to the tune of around 47 to 48 billion dollar will come under a high tariff. 47 to 48 billion will continue because we have a level playing field either under Section 232 or under the exempted category. But I'm pretty sure in medium to long term, industry is looking into diversification, de-risking. The government is also providing them with a new free trade agreements, which are opening better market for India. And domestic market is equally encouraging. Though, of course, in short term, there will be challenges for the industry. US is, of course, one of our major export destinations. But we have been given to understand that a lot of the global companies who are procuring from India, they are also taking with the idea that the Indian supply can be exported to European Union and the supply from other partner country, maybe Bangladesh or Vietnam, may be earmarked to the US. So while it may impact my exports to US, but it may not impact my overall exports. The export to the US may get diverted to European Union or to other countries also. And industry is also looking into the new market. I think one of the good point out of this, the tariff war, is the fact that industry is more keen to diversify and de-risk from that.
Absolutely. And in fact, Angie and Chris, I'd like to bring you both in on this, because the point is this. The point is that here you have on the one hand Indian markets, Indian businesses that are looking to compete and in fact take their business elsewhere. And look at the kind of agencies that are talking about the impact of US tariffs. We're talking about Standard & Poor's Global. We're talking about Moody's. We're talking about Fitch. They're saying the impact is little to nothing on the Indian economy. So what is this great impact that President Trump is talking about? Nobody seems to understand it. These aren't Indian companies, mind you. Many of them are headquartered in the United States.
Yes, and again, this is a PR campaign. We don't expect this to be a long-term tariff. Hopefully, we can all play happily together.
It's a PR campaign by the White House, you're saying?
Yes. And again, we saw in June and July, there was a lot of shipments coming in from Asia. A lot of suppliers and retailers stocked up knowing that there's tariffs coming down the pipeline. They hope that this tariff will be resolved very soon. But again, these are the pressure points. This is exactly how President Trump makes his deals, is by holding the cards. He wants to put these pressure points on India. And hopefully good things will come of it. And hopefully this is a short-term.
Well, will good things come of it? It seems a bit too optimistic at the moment in terms of an interpretation, judging by what we're looking at in terms of just the responses around this panel. But let's see how things pan out. Is it just a PR campaign by the White House, as Angie Wong is saying? That's perhaps the best case scenario. But even if it is, the manner in which the rhetoric has played out has left a very bitter taste here in India, at least. I'd like to thank Angie Wong, Christopher Clary, as well as Dr. Ajay Sahai and Sushant Sareen for joining us on this very significant moment. Is this perhaps a new paradigm when it comes to India-US ties? We'll have to wait and watch. Thanks so much for joining us.